When we get to the minute of silence, I usually give a head nod. And so keep an eye out for. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you.
Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Church of Toledo on this February 12th, 2023, Super Bowl Sunday for some of you. I am Judy Lee Troutman, today's service associate. Our senior minister, the Reverend Dr. T.K. Barger, will lead the service. We are a church with no set doctrine or official creed. Instead, we covenant to support each other in our individual search for truth and meaning. We are a diverse congregation who come from many spiritual traditions and none, with diverse sexual orientations and ethnicities. We welcome everyone, as we sang in our opening song. If you are a visitor, you may notice in the pew rack in front of you a rainbow-colored card with our principles and sources. Feel free to take it with you. There is also a yellow card that you may use to introduce yourself to us. If you include your email address, we will send you our weekly email with news of our many activities. As you meet people today, feel free to introduce yourself and ask any questions you may have. Today, we have a choir under the leadership of Jeffrey Maxey, who we might say for last Sunday and today is giving us a live audition to possibly be our next music director. As we don't currently have a regular choir, our singers are people in our congregation who are volunteering to help with this hiring process. If you want to share your impressions, be in touch with Tom Sheehan after the service.
With David Strickler today after the service.
Pardon?
With David Strickler today.
Oh, sorry, with David Strickler today after the service. We thank Jeffrey for his willingness to play and direct under this kind of introduction to our congregation. Please look in our order of service for announcements or go to UUFYI email or our Facebook private group. And if you're watching on YouTube, send an email to office@uutoledo.org and we can put you on our communications list. We'll give one or two specific announcements near the end of the service, but there's more that might be of interest to you. There's lots to do in our Toledo Unitarians congregation, and we'd like you to be a part of our church on Sundays and throughout the week. We appreciate your presence in person, and we also welcome our online congregation and invite you to come to our building when you can.
Hi, I'm Reverend Tim. I'm the senior minister at First Unitarian Church of Toledo. Especially on our minds, in our hearts, with our spirits today, for those who have not already heard, our friend and longtime member Bernie Spiegel died Wednesday evening. Many are aware that he had health challenges for many years, and this time when cancer was a factor, Bernie chose not to continue taking all measures. He didn't want to die, but he really was tired of pain. Our thoughts, our heart, our prayers are with him, with Susan, and with their sons and daughters. We'll have a celebration of Bernie's life this coming Saturday at 1 o'clock here in the sanctuary, followed by a reception in Fellowship Hall. Among other points for meditation and focus today, we know that there are members of our congregation who have health challenges, some bringing focused medical attention and others now a new way of life for them. We hope their outlooks are positive as they face major changes, continue what's become a new normal, or prepare as much as anyone really can for the end of life, whether that will be soon or distant. We welcome their guidance about comfort with visitors and how much news about them to share. There are deaths and grieving in our circles, and new lives born, and many other joys and celebrations. There are also health and welfare challenges in families and financial struggles for many. Plus, for some, weather or location can seem to affect everything. Let's give dignity and respect to all as we don't know what they're going through. We hold closely the continuing Russian invasion of Ukraine. We side with the Ukrainians who must fight for their home. And we feel for the Russians wronged by their own government in this attempt at conquest of a neighbor. And we mourn the damage and the many tens of thousands now of deaths from the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. In Northwest Ohio, there are many people with Syrian roots and people with Turkish ancestry as well. So this disaster is not far away. One reason we join in religious gatherings is to realize common links. The uncommon is here too. Let's be together in faith, hope, and love. May we have compassion for all.
Our opening words this morning are from Living Brings Us Closer to Dying by Helen Lutron Cohen. Each moment of our living brings us closer to our dying. Young or old, the knowledge of life's end is with us, growing more real, more familiar through the experiences of time and of loss. Yet, what is to keep us from frittering away what time is left to us, making it almost a matter of indifference that we have passed this way? How are we to grasp the urgency of life, to know and seize the moment that will lift us out of mere survival into that realm where someone after us will say, "She truly lived"? Or is true living a day by day thing, the accumulation of many tiny acts that all together say, "He lived"? Either path will do, sudden or almost imperceptible. They will lead us beyond self preoccupation and protection to the safe ground of understanding and acceptance. We will come to know within ourselves the satisfaction and peace of having lived with consciousness and purpose. We will know the joy of having given ourselves to life. Amen.
And as Judy lights the chalice, I have these words from Maureen Killeran. Love is the aspiration, the spirit that moves and inspires this faith we share. Rightly understood, love can nurture our spirits and transform the world. May the flame of this chalice honor and embody the power and the blessing of the love we need, the love we give, the love we are challenged always to remember and to share. And if you will join me, let's recite the covenant of our congregation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Our opening hymn today, in honor of this being Black History Month, is number 149, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Some people call it the African American National Anthem, and it is a wonderful piece of music. Please rise as you're willing and able and join in singing Lift Every Voice and Sing. Lyrics will be on the screen as well as in your hymnal.
Every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the glory sing. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark night has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has taught us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Through the road we trod, into the chasing rod, felt in the gates when hope unborn and died. Yet with a steady beat and not a weary feet, come to the place for which our Father sighed. We have come over the way that the tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out of the gloomy past, till we must stand at last, where the white gleam of our star is cast. Not of our weary years, not of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus along the way. Thou who hast by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path we pray. Bless our feet stray from the places, our God, where we live thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow
Pardon me. Good morning. I would like to ask my little friends to come forward and sit with me here if they would like to. Awesome. Have a seat. Have a seat, Susie. Just right on the floor is good. Are we ready? I am going to tell you a story about choosing love and how we can all sometimes mess up and choose selfishness instead. Once upon a time, a very old, wise preschool teacher named Mr. Aardvark and his students faced a problem that seemed to be too big for them to solve, and how they found a way. Mr. Aardvark's school was not very big. There were just 4 preschoolers: Bluebird, Cat, Dog, and Elephant. Mr. Aardvark started out the school day with a happy smile on his face. He shuffled over to his comfortable armchair by the circle rug and asked all his little friends to gather round. And he said to them with a happy smile, "I have great news for you today. We're going to have 3 new students joining us. Isn't that exciting?" Cat and Dog nodded, but Mr. Aardvark noticed that Bluebird and Elephant didn't look so happy. "What's wrong, Bluebird? Elephant?" he said. "Aren't you excited about our new friends joining us today?" Elephant said, "Yeah, that's great." But Bluebird put her wings on her hips and made an angry face. "This is terrible," she said. "Our circle rug is barely big enough for the 4 of us. Where are the new students going to sit?" Mr. Aardvark's heart sank. He had to admit that sharing the circle rug had been a problem that year. Elephant just needed so much room, and Cat and Dog did best if they didn't sit right next to each other. So Mr. Aardvark had taken 2 pieces of masking tape and divided the rug into 4 equal sections like big pieces of pie. This worked out fine for Dog and Cat and Bluebird, but Mr. Aardvark had to admit it didn't work out so well for Elephant. He was far too big to sit on his section of the rug, so he was always sort of half on and half off. And sometimes one of his big feet would wander into somebody else's section and cause great disruption. A knock on the schoolroom door interrupted Mr. Aardvark's thoughts. All of the children turned expectantly to look at the door, and in hopped the smallest frog any of them had ever seen. There was a sigh of relief in the classroom as they all realized that Frog wouldn't need much room. But then the next student walked in, and she was the tallest creature any of them had ever seen. What do you think she was? She was a giraffe. And she was even taller than Elephant. And then the third student who came in behind her was Giraffe's twin sister. Frog hopped over to the edge of the rug, and the giraffe twins followed shyly behind, arm in arm, neck to neck. "Welcome, welcome," boomed Mr. Aardvark. "Children, make some room on the rug for our new friends." "There's no more room on the rug," piped up Bluebird. "This is my quarter of the rug, and that's Cat, Dog's quarter, and Elephant's quarter. There's no more room. Sorry." "I can't sit on the rug anyway," croaked Frog. "It's far too dry and prickly for a fellow like me. Maybe I'll just head back to the pond." The giraffe twins looked uncomfortable. "We can't go anywhere," one of them said. The other one chimed in. "What did Mom say?" "Our mom told us we had to stay here until she came to pick us up after work." "Well, now nobody needs to go home," said Mr. Aardvark. "Surely there's enough room for everyone on the rug." Dog made a helpful and generous suggestion. "What if we just get some more tape? We can." Am I doing this? Is this me? Okay. All right. It's me. Thank you. Dog made a helpful and generous suggestion. "Maybe we could divide the rug into 7 equal sections." Elephant, who was already half on and half off of his too small space, looked worried, and the giraffe twins looked worried too. This is my spot, and I was here first, Bluebird announced stubbornly. There was a long and awkward silence. Finally, Mr. Aardvark motioned to Cat, hopped up onto his lap. Mr. Aardvark whispered something into Cat's ear, and Cat pulled out one long, sharp claw. Bluebird looked at the claw nervously. Mr. Aardvark rose from his chair and asked the students to join him to move off of the circle rug. He took all the tape off the rug and he studied the rug for a long time. Then he took his paw and drew an imaginary line through the rug. And Cat took her claw and cut the rug right where Mr. Aardvark had indicated. Bluebird, dog, cat, and elephant couldn't believe, Bluebird, dog, elephant, and frog couldn't believe their eyes. Cat was cutting up the circle rug. Mr. Aardvark drew another imaginary line, and Cat cut along that line as well. And then a third line and a third piece of the rug. A stunned silence filled the room. Bluebird hopped up and down in outrage. When the cutting was done, Mr. Aardvark looked down at the pile of rug pieces, all of different sizes, at his feet. He gave the smallest piece to Cat. He gave a medium-sized piece to Dog and a really big piece to Elephant. Cat and Dog and Elephant settled onto their rug pieces and looked as happy as they could be. "But that's not fair!" exclaimed Bluebird. "Why does Elephant get such a big piece? And where's mine?" There was just one large piece of the rug left, and still Bluebird, Frog, and the Giraffe Girls had nowhere to sit. "This one is for you," Mr. Aardvark said, as he laid the biggest piece in front of the Giraffe Girls. "Thank you," they said, and they settled into a cozy tangle of 8 long legs and 2 long necks. The rug was exactly the right size for these 2 sisters to share. Mr. Aardvark returned to his armchair as Bluebird continued her protests. Quick as can be, Cat was back in Mr. Aardvark's lap, and this time she had her little cat backpack in her teeth. Mr. Aardvark unzipped the backpack and took out Cat's beautiful red water bowl. He sat it down at his feet and said, "Will this do for you, Frog?" Frog didn't say anything until Mr. Aardvark poured a little bit of water in the bowl. And then Frog hop, hop, splashed right into the bowl and gave a contented croak. "Dog," inquired Cat as they sat back down on the rug pieces, "would you mind if I shared your water bowl at snack time?" "Not at all," said Dog, feeling pretty proud of Cat and thinking about how much he would like to be her friend. "But what about me? What about me?" squeaked Bluebird. "Where am I going to sit? There's no more room." Mr. Aardvark patted the arm of his chair. "You can perch right here by me," he said. "I'd like to share my spot with you." Bluebird looked around the room. No one looked worried anymore. All of her old friends looked happy and relaxed, and all of the new friends did too. Suddenly, Bluebird felt a little bit ashamed of how unwelcoming she had been to the new friends and how much she had insisted on a whole quarter of the rug. She could see now that there was enough room for everybody in the classroom and a perfect spot for Frog too. When everyone had just what they needed, everyone felt good, and so did Bluebird. "Bluebirds aren't really made to sit on rugs," Bluebird announced. "Bluebirds are meant to perch." So Bluebird flew to the arm of Mr. Aardvark's chair, and Bluebird perched, and everything was good.
It's just about time for our meditation, contemplation, and prayer to have you know now, after our traditional minute of silence when we close, we will have a different reflection hymn today. Instead of Spirit of Life, we will sing the first verse of number 318, We Would Be One. The lyrics are in the order of service, and they'll be on the screen as well. Please join me for meditation, contemplation, and prayer. This meditation comes by way of our Unitarian Universalist worship web from Enfleshed, an organization seeking to provide individuals and communities with spiritual and theological resources for liturgy, prayer, and contemplation, preaching, teaching, and consulting that speak directly to what matters most. And this is their litany for becoming. To become is a lifelong process. Nothing is constant, not even the self. We evolve in the midst of narratives meant only for some and ways of being made narrow by fear and power. We must then have the courage to listen to the truth of our own lives, to the wisdom that comes from within, responding without resistance or need to control, but with welcome and curiosity. This is what ensures our becoming is an unfolding of our truest self. This all our life labor cannot be carried out alone. It requires help from friends and lovers, family, and creaturely companions who bear witness to what makes us come alive and say to us, listen, look, feel, pay attention to that. This is loving and being loved. Telling the stories, sharing in the memories, giving thanks for the relationships, understandings, and experiences past that have shaped us to this day. This is loving and being loved. Celebrating new beginnings that excite, holding risks together, leaning into unknowns with the promises of support and companionship. This is loving and being loved. Listening to the future calling uniquely to each of us over all of life's noises. Helping one another find our place in the shared labor of collective life. Supporting each other in what it is the world's ache is asking from us. This is loving and being loved. To say for the first time, this is who I am. This is the truth of my body. This is what I know about myself. This is my name, and this is where my path is leading me. And to have it heard, have it received, have it affirmed. And then to say it again and again. As we change and as the world changes, and to have each proclamation greeted with an open-armed embrace. This is loving and being loved. There is no me without you. We shape one another. The sacred that birthed us weaves our lives together so that we can only find ourselves through shared becoming. For my journey and all its winding ways, for yours, for all the saints who labored for what is, all the kin whose lives made ours possible, for all those yet to come, for whom living our truths today will mean breaking possibilities open for them tomorrow. We pause, we give thanks, we acknowledge. This is loving and being loved. Let's observe 1 minute of silence. Amen.
As now we join singing our hymn of love, repent yourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other, to show to all a new community.
Our reading this morning is by Herbert Spencer. The law is the survival of the fittest. The law is not the survival of the better, or the stronger, if we give to those words anything like their ordinary meanings, it is the survival of those which are constitutionally fittest to thrive under the conditions in which they are placed. And very often, that which, humanly speaking, is inferiority causes the survival.
Today, I'm talking about survival, focused on Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. But to begin, I should at least mention that the National Football League's Super Bowl also happens today, in which the two remaining teams from the playoffs compete. And this year we'll see whether Chiefs or Eagles are ultimate survivors in their game. And I can also insert survival into the concept of Valentine's Day, which is the day after tomorrow, to say that I hope for you who are coupled, your relationship survives the attention to affection and romance, regardless of the quality of your gifts and demonstrations of love. Plus, I know that a few of our members are in Florida, having sought warmer weather rather than surviving the winter in place here. Hello to our Toledo Unitarians tuning in on YouTube, wherever you are. The title of survival doesn't seem the best fit for today now, as I think of Bernie Spiegel and his not surviving the cancer that visited him at the end of last year, after his having had so many other ongoing health issues, dying 4 days ago. But I'll be speaking of more things than just life and death. Bernie was silly sometimes, and he could tell not the best of jokes. So he would appreciate that I had the briefest of mentions of the Super Bowl and Valentine's Day. At least in our thoughts, Bernie is very much with us. But today I speak of survival. This is Darwin Day, the 214th anniversary of Charles Darwin's birth. Charles Darwin was the author of On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. The revolutionary work on evolutionary theory that put forth the concept of natural selection. To my knowledge, that favored races does not refer to differences among humans, as we are all scientifically one race. Natural selection, according to Darwin, is described in this way in Janet Brown's book, Darwin's Origin of Species, part of a series of biographies of books that changed the world. Brown wrote, "Too many individuals are born," Darwin paraphrased from economist Thomas Robert Malthus. "There is a war in nature, a struggle for existence. In the fight to live, the worst or weakest organisms tend to die first, leaving the better forms, the healthiest or better adapted. These survivors would be the ones that generally had offspring. If such actions were repeated over and over again, organisms tend to become ever more appropriately suited to their conditions of existence." He called it this process natural selection, meaning a process in the natural world analogous to the artificial selection that he saw farmers and horticulturalists applying to domestic animals and plants. Farmers disposed of the worst and saved the best for breeding purposes in order to create a faster greyhound or a woollier sheep. In the wild, Darwin suggested, it was nature itself that did the selecting. In short, he hit upon a way of explaining the perfectly designed adaptations described by Archdeacon William Paley, the author of Natural Theology, without any reference to a creator. Being well prepared to appreciate the struggle for existence, Darwin wrote in a notebook, it at once struck me that under these circumstances, favorable variations would tend to be preserved and unfavorable ones to be destroyed. Here then I had at last got a theory by which to work. This was the essence of Darwin's theory, Brown continued, scarcely to change except in one major point until it was published 20 years later in Origin of Species. She didn't note here what that major point was. He recognized its explanatory power, saying it would revolutionize the biological sciences. He acknowledged its religious implications, not only for the new vistas it opened up for the possible origin of mankind, but also for the way it would deny any role for God in nature and challenge the natural theologians so firmly embedded in British life and institutions. And that ends Brown's quote. Darwin's own religion had roots in Unitarianism from his mother, who took him to her church as a child, but he was only about 8 years old when she died. And his wife, Emma Wedgwood, was a cousin from that Unitarian side. And he had roots in Anglicanism from his father, and prior to becoming a biologist, he had been in university studying to be a priest. It seems more under family pressure than any personal devotion. Natural selection is not the same as survival of the fittest, a phrasing and concept of Darwin's friend Herbert Spencer. And in my reading, Spencer was introducing what came to be called social Darwinism, more of a sociology aspect than biological. But evolutionary theory has come to be called often survival of the fittest. And that phrase being popular is why I'm using it as the title for my words today. Judy Lee Troutman gave a Herbert Spencer quotation on survival of the fittest as the reading before my talk. Note that Spencer includes the notion that inferiority can be a factor in survival. So it's not necessarily survival of the strongest or the best, however that's interpreted, but survival of those in the position to thrive in a particular circumstance, you might say. Peter R. Grant, an emeritus professor of zoology at Princeton University, published these words in Scientific American in 1991. I have thus far referred to survival rather than fitness in order to avoid a misunderstanding created more than a century ago by Herbert Spencer. Spencer erroneously equated natural selection with the survival of the fittest, a phrase he coined to popularize Darwin's work. The problem is one of circular reasoning. When the fittest are manifested such only by surviving, the phrase reduces to the survival of the survivors. Nevertheless, survival of the fittest, or better, the higher frequency of survival among the fittest, does convey part of the essence of natural selection, provided 2 points are understood. First, Some individuals are more fit than others by virtue of their particular traits. Second, fitness is ultimately judged by the number of offspring an individual contributes to the next generation. There's one more reference I should include in today's talk, noting that there's a pretty recent instance of bad history in Unitarianism. We had involvements of Unitarians and Universalists in the eugenics movement in the early 20th century, trying in essence to breed fitter human beings, even using the concept that war meant our best were lost in battle and therefore wouldn't reproduce. And eugenics, in consequence, would not allow those without the fittest qualities to contribute to their genes to future generations. More on Unitarians, Universalists, and eugenics another time. Just know that all science is not good science, and we can be misled. Natural selection was Darwin's term, but survival of the fittest has survived as the general notion of evolutionary theory, and it will continue to be used. Janet Brown, in her biography of Darwin's book, Origin of Species, wrote that Darwin struggled with his vocabulary. The language he had to hand was the language of Milton and Shakespeare, steeped in teleology and purpose, not the objective, value free terminology sought by science. He was not even able to speak of evolution as such, because at that time, the term was mostly used to describe the unfolding of hidden embryological structures. It was the ensuing debate around his published work that gave the word its modern meaning. In Origin of Species, Darwin generally referred to descent with modification. Equally, he did not at first use what ultimately became the most famous phrase of all, survival of the fittest. This was coined a few years afterwards by Herbert Spencer in 1864, after which Alfred Russel Wallace suggested Darwin should substitute it for natural selection. All these verbal ambiguities would lead readers in directions that Darwin did not intend. Yet, his theory survived. And we get to survival of today. In popular culture, I'd say the tie is to Darwin with no knowledge of Spencer. And the phrase doesn't even do justice to Darwin. When survival of the fittest is used, my impression is that the meaning really isn't there. Just some reference to dominance or power or something prevailing rather than having a tie to evolutionary science. Or it's used ironically, trying to show that something that shouldn't have happened is now the way of the world, like a lying congressional candidate being called out for lying more than most and being elected. Too many of us, me included, when I don't include research and the studies of others, speak of Darwin's work with too little knowledge of what that work was. And some of us misunderstand that his theory is a result of much scientific examination, not the equivalent of an unfounded idea. Plus, we make natural selection instant rather than over the long, long process of evolution. As in COVID-19 determining survival of the fittest. Fitness and health aren't synonyms. As in the boomer generation, of which I'm a member and probably most of you, hello, Boomer, having been the fittest in recent time, and now are all of a sudden realizing we're aged, and newer generations are taking our place. And it's the passage of time, not the fervor of youth, that is our bigger threat, I'd say. But that's only a generation, not an age of civilization or an era of a 4.5 billion or so years old planet. As in, wondering if we're witnessing a change of civilizations and speculating that we're really in some evolution of the human species from the thinking person to some cybernetic enhanced life. And then we come back and see the world in which we live. Survival for many is making it through the day, through the week, to the next payday, successfully managing disease or financial need or other stress, including interpersonal relationships. Survival for some is experiencing a police stop and being able to drive away afterward. Survival can be leaving one's home and returning to it. You might say evolution doesn't really affect those of us for whom our own survival or the survival of loved ones is paramount. The world needs to change in other ways than biology. But it's Darwin Day. We're thankful that Charles Darwin changed the world by giving us a scientific explanation for how life changes over the eons. We're thankful that we can see evidence of evolution. Plus, we're thankful that we don't need to know all about the origin of species to live our normal lives. Survival is important. How do we do that? By living as well as we can. So be it.
Thank you, Reverend Tim. Our words introducing the offering are adapted from Generosity is Our Spiritual Value by Victoria Weinstein. Our congregation is entirely self-governed by democratic process. One of the privileges of our free church tradition is to provide all of the financial support for our many ministries from among ourselves. Generosity, therefore, is one of the spiritual values we recognize as central to our personal and our institutional well-being. You are now invited to participate in the blessing of giving, and you may do that in 3 different ways. You can go to uutoledo.org, click Give, and then Online Giving, or you can mail a check to our physical address, 3205 Glendale Avenue, Toledo, Ohio, 43614, or you may drop your offering in the basket on the table at the entrance. There are envelopes in the pew racks if you choose to do it in that way. And we thank you.
Our offertory music today with our choir, led by Jeffrey Maxey, is number 1007 in the Teal hymnal. There's a river flowing in my soul, and the lyrics will be on the screen as well.
There's a river flowing in my soul.
There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me there's somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind. And it's telling me there's somebody. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing in my soul.
Coming soon. You begin. You begin with coming soon, Judy.
Are-
Oh,
You didn't have anything for coming this week?
coming this week, you're invited to attend the Multi-Faith Council of Northwest Ohio's Winter Holy Day event today from 3 to 4:30 at the Sanger Branch Library. Learn about the Winter Holy Days of 3 different faith traditions. Families with children are especially welcome. There will be interactive activities and treats to enjoy. Plus, with some Unitarian Universalists there, it might help for a spring holiday of ours to be part of a later event. Maybe our flower ceremony, which will be held June 4th. And next week, the 9:45 a.m. Spiritual Forum is still in the planning. Please come to Fellowship Hall at 9:45 next Sunday and take part. And then the 11 a.m. Sunday service is titled The Dial. It's another in my series on Transcendentalists, as The Dial was the magazine edited by Transcendentalist Margaret Fuller.
And today, after the service, do come to coffee hour and social time down the hall and to your left. Our closing words today are Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places by David S. Blanchard. Most of us look for love in only the most obvious places, and as a result, most of us come away disappointed. It's as if we are still grade school kids, counting Valentines as a measure of what matters. The love that matters is not typically the subject of sonnets or love songs. There can be love in being told we are wrong. There can be love in sharing a regret. There can be love in asking for help. There can be love in communicating hurt. There can be love in telling hard truths. Most of us find it painful to live at this level of love, but it can be there even in these most unlikely places. It isn't the kind of love we've been promised in the fairy tales of princes and fairy godmothers, but it is the kind experienced by frogs and dwarfs. It's the sort of love that can bring us closer to finding the missing pieces of ourselves that we need to make us whole. Some of the most loving things I've ever experienced, I haven't been ready for, wasn't looking for, and nearly didn't recognize. A few of them I didn't want. But all of them have changed me, transformed some part of me, filled in a place that I didn't even know was empty. When the Valentine has been tucked away in a drawer, the candy eaten, the flowers faded and gone, there will be other legacies of love that will last as long as we do, because they have brought us to know an element of life, part feeling, part idea, part mystery that once known is ours to keep.
You could say that today begins a week of awareness as signified by the anniversary of Charles Darwin, whose curiosity made us aware of evolution in the development of life. It's a week of play as Chiefs and Eagles compete for a game trophy. And it's a week of love. Happy Valentine's, however you celebrate your love for others. We send the flame into the community for our ways to be lit to experience so much of life, the universe, and everything. Blessed be. And our postlude music is number 108. My life flows on in endless song.
My life flows on in endless song. The love's lamentation. I hear the ring of far-off wind that is a new creation. Through all the jungle and the sky, I hear you singing. It sounds and echoes in my soul. How can I keep from singing? Although the tempest round me roars, I know the truth in my hand. I know the heart is round me close. Songs in my heart, if you will. No storm will shake my windows strong. Up to the dawn, I'm clinging. Since all is in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When hearts tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing. Friendly joys from far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon time, the thoughts of them are ringing. When friends are sharing around me high, how can I keep from singing?